Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're cracking open a couple of sources that look simple, maybe, but seem to pack a real punch about understanding and, well, getting things done.
Yeah, we've got this article, Simple Questions with Big Answers, from Awkward Silence. And then there's this reference to a scientific paper in Cell called Tiny Answers to Big Questions.
So our mission for this deep dive is to kind of see how these two fit together.
Yeah.
What do they tell us about finding those leverage points, where a small question or even a small answer can unlock something much bigger?
It's a really interesting pairing, actually. A bit of a contrast, maybe, but also complementary.
Okay, let's unpack this then. Starting with that awkward silence piece, simple questions with big answers. It really gets into the power of just a short, simple prompt.
It does, and it uses these great examples like the Future Is exhibition
Hmm.
at the Museum of Brisbane. They just ask people to complete that phrase.
Just 3 words.
Right. And apparently they got these incredibly heartfelt answers, people from all walks of life, different ages, different languages even.
It's amazing what such a simple thing can trigger. It made the author think of those before I die walls, too. You know the ones.
Oh yeah, the big chalkboards in public spaces.
Exactly. Where people write, before I die, I want to finish the sentence.
And the point the article makes is these aren't just like fun little art things. They're popular, yes, but they're genuinely powerful. They actually make people,
Stop and think.
yeah, properly reflect. Maybe set a goal or just look up from the day-to-day grind and think about the bigger picture for a second.
The article calls them interruptions. And it argues we kind of need those interruptions because routines, well, they're useful, right? We need them.
Sure, they help us function.
But it's so easy to get lost. There's this line in the source, it really hit me, about how decades can just vanish while you're on autopilot.
Wow, decades can just disappear.
Yeah.
That's potent.
And that's why these interruptions, these catalysts, as the source calls them, are so important. They kind of shake you out of it.
Make you evaluate things, think differently, even for a moment.
And that can lead anywhere, really. New ideas, maybe changing direction slightly, spotting an opportunity you were just too busy to see before, or even just shifting your attitude.
And it doesn't always have to be
That's a great point.
Yeah.
Which kind of leads us nicely to the second source, doesn't it? This idea of simplicity having power.
It does. So this is quite different on the surface. It's a PubMed entry for a scientific article, Journal Cell 2017 by April Pollock.
And the title again is Tiny Answers to Big Questions.
Yeah, tiny answers. Coming from Cell, which publishes, fundamental biological research, that title really jumps out.
It really does. So,
Yeah.
okay, if the first source is saying simple questions can lead to big internal answers or insights,
Uh-huh.
does this Cell title maybe suggest that the solutions to big, complex, external problems like scientific ones might often be found in something elegant, concise,
Wow.
tiny?
I think that's exactly the implication, or at least a very strong possibility it hints at. When you look at scientific history, major breakthroughs often boil down to a surprisingly fundamental insight.
Could you give an example?
Well, think about understanding heredity. The actual mechanism, the DNA double helix, it's a relatively simple structure, chemically speaking, but it explains this immense complexity.
Right, elegant is the word.
Or in cell biology, you might find a hugely complex process is regulated by just one key molecule or a very small signaling pathway. The answer that unlocks the complexity is often tiny compared to the question.
So it's like the scientific version of that aha moment we were
Right.
talking about with the personal reflection. The tiny answer isn't simplistic, it's focused. It's the bit that clarifies everything else.
Exactly. It cuts through the noise of the big, complex question. So both sources, in their own way, seem to value brevity and focus.
Yeah, whether it's the simple question that gets you thinking internally or the tiny answer that solves the complex external puzzle.
It seems the leverage point is often in that concise element, not necessarily in matching complexity with complexity.
Okay, so let's try and pull these two threads together then. We've got simple questions triggering big reflections and potentially tiny answers solving big problems. What's the takeaway for you listening to this?
Well, I think it suggests that maybe when you're feeling stuck or overwhelmed by complexity, the best first step isn't always to dive deeper into the weeds or look for an equally complicated solution.
Right. Maybe you need to step back, ask a really simple fundamental question first, like those prompts we talked about. What's the core issue here? What am I really trying to achieve? What matters most?
What's the one simple question that might just, cut through it all for you or unlock something you weren't seeing?
And then looking at it the other way, If you are grappling with what feels like a huge question, maybe at work or in your studies or just life,
Hmm.
perhaps the answer you're searching for isn't this giant, elaborate thing. Maybe it's a surprisingly small insight, a simple shift in perspective, or one key action.
A tiny answer waiting to be noticed. It could be that elegant point of clarity that, once you see it, makes everything else fall into place.
It's about finding that focus point, isn't it? The thing that gives you traction, whether it's the question or the answer.
So, looking back at our sources today, it feels like we've seen this clear theme. Simple questions can really be these powerful catalysts for insight, for breaking out of autopilot.
Definitely. And we've also mulled over this idea, prompted by the Cell article title, that big, complex problems might just yield to tiny, elegant solutions or insights,
Both really pointing to the surprising power that can be found in simplicity, in brevity, in focus.
which leaves us and you with something to think about, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Sort of provocative thought to take away.
Yeah. What's the big question you're wrestling with right now? Could there be a really simple question you need to ask about it?
Or is there maybe a tiny, elegant answer hiding in plain sight that holds the key?
Maybe the most profound path forward lies not in complexity, but in finding the power in the simple or the tiny. Something to ponder.